In August AD 75, you are a grain merchant's assistant sitting in a tavern on the Via dell'Abbondanza in Pompeii, holding a document case you opened by accident an hour ago. Inside it, records of a price-fixing arrangement involving 12 Campanian merchants and grain shipments worth 3 years of your salary. Not because you were looking for it, because the wrong case was left in exactly the right place for someone who wasn't supposed to see it. Here's what 2 hours inside a Roman tavern actually cost when ignorance stopped being available as an option. The grain merchant in Puteoli, who has no idea his assistant, is currently holding the only warning he'll ever get before the price-fixing arrangement wipes out his business. And hey, if stories like this help you drift off, take a second to subscribe. It means everything. You step through the doorway and the light changes. Not dramatically. Afternoon glare softening to amber shadow, your eyes adjusting to the interior, as the leather case shifts against your hip, with that particular weight of knowing exactly what you're carrying and wishing you didn't. The taberna sits 3 establishments down from the forum entrance, close enough that you can hear the murmur of the crowd negotiating contracts, far enough that nobody important will notice you waiting here. The cowpo glances up from the counter. Quick assessment. 1 nod, back to wiping down stone worn smooth by decades of forearms. The smell hits you before the visual details settle. Garum fermentation underneath everything. That fish salt base note Campania puts in every dish, layered over yeasty warmth from bread baked since dawn. Olive oil. Wine dregs. Stone holding the day's heat and releasing it slowly into the enclosed space. 6 dolia embedded in the counter, terracotta vessels sunk into the stonework at precise intervals, 5 of them accessible. 1 conspicuously empty, the wooden cover propped against it at an angle that suggests the cowpo stopped caring about appearances around midday. You take the bench along the wall where you can see the door. The case settles beside you. Not on the table, not on the floor. Positioned exactly where you can feel it without looking. Inside, your employer's correspondence organized by recipient, delivery dates noted in your handwriting on each wrapper. And underneath all of that, folded smaller than the rest, a sealed letter you found this morning when sorting incoming messages. Wrong pile. Wrong recipient. Wrong everything. The seal is intact. Dark red wax, pressed with a merchant's signet you don't recognize. Addressed to Marcus Tullius Severus, a grain broker in Neapolis. Not your employer, Gaius Latilius Rufus. Not your employer's client. Someone whose name you knew only as a competitor, until you held this letter up to the light, and read the first line through the fold. You were not supposed to read it. The wax was supposed to stay sealed. The letter was supposed to be in a different correspondence case entirely, headed to Neapolis with a courier who left yesterday. Instead it's here, against your hip, in a Pompeii tavern, where the late afternoon crowd is starting to filter in, and nobody has asked you a single question yet. The cowpo nods at you the way service professionals acknowledge other service professionals. Minimal eye contact, maximum efficiency, the universal signal for, you are waiting for someone more important than you, and I will not make this awkward by pretending otherwise. Roman class distinctions operate with the subtlety of a hammer. Your employer is 3 buildings away, somewhere in the forum's administrative section, completing a contract negotiation that was supposed to take 1 hour. It has now stretched past 3. The muleteer who transported you from Puteoli is outside with the cart, refusing to leave without payment, and payment cannot be issued until the contract is signed and your employer returns to authorize the disbursement. So you wait. Assistant waits for merchant. Muleteer waits for payment. The whole commercial network of Campania runs on this rhythm. Someone waiting for someone more important to finish the actual business. What the cowpo doesn't know, what the muleteer doesn't know, what your employer finishing his negotiation 3 buildings away doesn't know, you are holding evidence of a price-fixing arrangement that names 12 merchants, including the one currently shaking hands over a grain contract in the forum. The letter proposes coordinated pricing on companion wheat, delivery schedules synchronized across 4 ports. A competitor, the Pompeii merchant Quintus Gavius Atticus, whose name you recognized from bills of lading, positioned to undercut anyone who doesn't participate. Your employer Latilius Rufus, the man paying your salary, expecting you to have his correspondence organized when he returns, is not named in the arrangement, which means he's the target. You discovered this by accident. Opened the wrong document case while sorting morning correspondence. Read 3 lines before understanding what you were looking at. Could not unread them after. The leather case presses against your hip. The taberna fills with the low murmur of men finishing work, transitioning from labor to evening. Someone laughs near the back corner. Sharp and sudden, the sound of a wager won. The garum smell intensifies as the cook moves something in the back room. Bread cooling on the counter, still warm enough that the air above it wavers slightly in the oil lamplight. You have perhaps 2 hours before your employer finishes his negotiation. 2 hours to decide whether protecting his business is worth holding evidence you were never supposed to possess. The wax seal is still intact. You could return the letter to the correspondence case and pretend you never read it. You could deliver it as originally addressed, and let the arrangement proceed, without your employer knowing he was targeted. You could warn him, and lose your position when he asks how you obtained another merchant's private correspondence. Roman law does not require proof of intent when the evidence is physical and you are the one holding it. The case stays against your hip, the taberna stays warm. The decision has not become easier in 40 minutes of sitting here, and the crowd filtering through the door suggests evening is arriving whether you are ready for it or not. The counter runs the length of the room. Volcanic stone, darker than the tufa most of Pompeii uses, surface polished by use rather than design. The cowpo works behind it with the efficiency of someone who has occupied this exact position for longer than you have been alive. 6 dolia embedded at intervals, each one marked with faded paint indicating contents and price. 5 accessible, 1 empty since morning. The price list painted on the wall behind the counter shows the daily options in uneven numerals, repainted often enough that the layers are visible where the plaster has chipped. Stew, 3 asses. Bread, 1 as. Posca, 2 asses. Wine in 3 grades. The prices ascending in a vertical column that somebody updated recently, the paint still sharp-edged compared to the rest. Posca, the cowpo said. Fresh this morning. You nod. He pours from the second dolia without waiting for confirmation. Vinegar wine mixed with water and herbs, the default drink for anyone working rather than socializing, sets the cup on the counter, with the sound of terracotta on stone, a small precise noise in the larger murmur of the room. The liquid is cooler than the air, slightly cloudy, the herb blend sharper than what they serve in Puteoli. You drink. The acidity clears the dust from your throat, settles your stomach, which has been uncertain since you opened that letter this morning, and realized what you are holding. The taberna is filling incrementally. A freedman from the tanner's workshop 2 streets over takes the corner bench, still smelling of the lime solution they use for hides. A muleteer, not yours, someone else's, leans against the doorway talking to a man you don't recognize. Their conversation low enough that only the rhythm carries, not the words. 2 men at the back table have produced a tabular board, the wooden playing surface scarred with decades of use. Dice clatter. Someone curses without heat. The 6th dolia sits empty, its wooden cover propped at an angle that makes the absence obvious. The cowpo glances at it each time someone new enters. His expression compressed into something between apology and irritation directed at someone not present. The 6th dolia has been empty since morning because the supplier from the estate 7 miles south has not arrived, and the cowpo's expression when customers look at it communicates both apology and irritation directed at someone not present. Roman commercial infrastructure runs on the assumption that estate suppliers will eventually show up. Eventually is doing considerable work in that sentence. You finish the posca. The cup leaves a ring on the counter, darker stone against dark stone. The leather case beside you has not moved. The letter inside it has not changed. The seal remains intact. These are facts. Verifiable. Comforting in their stability, even as they solve nothing about what you're supposed to do with information you were never meant to possess. Your employer is still in the forum, the muleteer is still outside with the cart. Gavius Atticus, the Pompeii merchant who wrote that letter, is somewhere in this city, unaware that his correspondence never reached Neapolis. Marcus Tullius Severus, the competitor in Neapolis, is waiting for information that hasn't arrived. And you are sitting in a tavern on the Via dell'Abbondanza, with all of this compressed into leather and wax and the specific weight of professional consequences you can feel without seeing. The freedman orders wine, mid-grade, the second price tier. The cowpo pours without comment. The tabular game continues in the back corner, punctuated by the sharp sounds of dice hitting wood, and the brief exclamations that follow. The cook emerges from the back room carrying bread on a wooden board, the yeasty smell intensifying as he sets it on the counter to cool. The oil lamps along the wall are not yet necessary, but the light through the doorway has shifted from direct glare to the softer amber that means afternoon is ending and evening has not quite begun. You are in the space between. Waiting is a professional skill, you are competent at it. What you are less competent at, deciding whether intercepting another merchant's correspondence makes you the person protecting your employer's interests, or the person committing theft, under Roman commercial law. If Latilius Rufus discovers the arrangement before signing any contracts, he can withdraw from the wheat trade this season, minimize losses. If you are caught with Gavius Atticus's sealed correspondence, no explanation will matter. The seal itself is evidence. The case stays beside you. The warmth stays in the room. The decision stays unmade. The smell of garum is stronger now. Not overwhelming, just present underneath every other scent, the way stone is present underneath plaster. The fermented fish base note that Campanian cooking builds everything on. Salt and protein. And the particular tang of controlled decomposition turned into flavor. The bread on the counter carries it. The wine carries it. Even the posca had that faint umami edge that means someone added a splash to the herb mixture before serving. You set the empty cup down. The cowpo collects it without ceremony, rinses it in the basin behind the counter, sets it with the others, waiting for the next customer. The rhythm of the room continues. Low conversation, dice impact, footsteps on stone, the scrape of a bench being repositioned. Normal sounds. Commercial district tavern sounds, the acoustic texture of men finishing work, and transitioning to evening with the casual certainty that tomorrow will require the same transition. The leather case against your hip contains a letter you discovered by accident this morning. Not because you were searching your employer's correspondence for evidence of commercial conspiracy, because someone, a clerk, a courier, another assistant operating under the same pressure of administrative perfection you operate under, put the wrong document in the wrong case, and you found it while organizing outgoing messages. You read it. 3 lines. Held up to the light streaming through the window of your employer's Puteoli office. The wax seal intact but the fold loose enough that text was visible through the gap. 3 lines that named a price-fixing arrangement involving 12 Campanian grain merchants. 3 lines that made it clear your employer, the man currently in the forum negotiating a contract that he believes will secure his position in the wheat trade, was not part of the arrangement, which makes him the target. The letter is addressed but not sent, which means you have it instead of its intended recipient, which means you are currently the only person in Pompeii sitting on information about a grain price-fixing arrangement worth 3 years of your salary. The professional term for this situation is problem. The freedman at the corner bench shifts position, his voice rising slightly as he addresses the cowpo. Vesuvian red, he asked. Estate cart, the cowpo said. Late again. The freedman grunts, not surprise, confirmation of something suspected. He settles back with his mid-grade wine, apparently willing to accept second choice, over waiting for a supplier who may not arrive before closing. The tabular game in the back corner intensifies briefly. Raised voices, the sharp clatter of dice thrown harder than necessary, then laughter. Someone won. Someone else is paying for the next round. The rhythm resets. You are invisible in this room, not because you are hiding, because you are exactly what you appear to be. A merchant's assistant waiting for his employer, occupying a bench, causing no disruption, generating no interest. Your clothing marks you as commercial administrative class. Your posture marks you as someone accustomed to waiting. The document case beside you marks you as professional rather than social. Everything about your presence here reads as temporary and unremarkable. What they cannot see, the sealed letter folded smaller than the rest, tucked beneath correspondence that was supposed to be delivered today. What they cannot know. You have been sitting here for nearly an hour, trying to calculate whether protecting your employer's business is worth the professional destruction that will follow, if anyone asks why you are carrying another merchant's private correspondence. The law is clear. Physical possession of sealed documents not addressed to you is theft. Intent is not required when the evidence is in your hands. Explanation is not a defense when the seal shows you had no authorization to open it. Except you didn't open it. You just read through the fold, which is somehow both better and worse, because it proves you knew you weren't supposed to see the contents, and looked anyway. You could return it to the correspondence case unopened. Pretend this morning never happened. Let the letter reach its intended recipient through whatever channel was originally intended. Your employer, Latilius Rufus, would never know his business was targeted. The price-fixing arrangement would proceed. Within 6 months, maybe less, Campanian wheat prices would shift just enough to make his margins unworkable. He would survive. He's competent. He has other contracts. But his position in the grain trade would erode from sustainable to precarious, without him ever understanding why. Or you could warn him. Which requires explaining how you obtained information from a sealed letter, addressed to Marcus Tullius Severus in Neapolis. Which requires admitting you read correspondence that was not yours to read. Which ends with you losing your position and quite possibly facing legal consequences for theft, regardless of your intentions. And if Gavius Atticus discovers his letter never reached Neapolis, if he traces it back to a misplaced document case in Puteoli, if your name surfaces in that investigation, you become the person who disrupted a conspiracy worth 12 merchants' combined annual revenue. That is not a professional category with favorable outcomes. The oil lamps along the wall are gaining relevance now, not necessary yet, but the light through the doorway has softened enough that the flame glow is visible, small warm points in the amber shadow. The bread on the counter has stopped steaming. The garum smell has settled into background, present but no longer actively noticed. The tabular players have lowered their voices to the steady murmur of a game that will last until someone runs out of coins or patience. Your employer is still in the forum, the muleteer is still outside, the letter is still sealed. And you are still sitting here 45 minutes into a decision that has not become clearer with time. The case stays against your hip. The weight stays constant. The room stays warm. The freedman is speaking now. Not because he needs to. Because the silence reached the point where maintaining it became more effort than breaking it. Broken wrist, he says. Left-handed fighter, useless after that. The muleteer shifts position. His cup is empty, but he hasn't moved to refill it. Seen him work, he says. Shield work compensated. The freedman shakes his head. Small movement. Definite. Can't compensate for reach. Wrist controls the angle. Fighter loses 6 inches of effective range. Against a competent opponent, that's fatal. You're not part of this conversation. You're listening to it the way you listen to dice landing. ambient sound that confirms the room is functioning as expected. The muleteer counters with transport logistics, how an injury affects gate timing, crowd flow through the amphitheater exits. He structures his argument in cause and effect chains that suggest he's thought about this before, probably while waiting for payment outside other venues. The freedman responds with comparative analysis, references a fight from 2 years ago by specific date, no personal investment, pure technical disagreement. The freedman and the muleteer have reached provisional friendship through the social mechanics of sitting near each other long enough that silence became more awkward than conversation. They will never see each other again after tonight. This does not affect the conviction with which they are currently debating gladiatorial arm injuries. The document case sits against your hip. Still sealed. Still viable as something you could return without consequence if you stopped thinking about consequences. The cowpo emerges from the back room, deposits fresh bread on the counter, returns without speaking. The tabular game continues. Someone wins, someone loses. The dice sound the same either way. Your employer, Marcus Octavius Secundus, is still in the forum. The muleteer is still unpaid. The letter is still undelivered to Gaius Livius Primus, the merchant who was supposed to receive it in his villa on the north slope. And you are still the only person in Pompeii who knows it exists in your possession, rather than in the correspondence stream where it belongs. The evening transition is beginning. You can hear it in the footsteps, different rhythm than afternoon traffic, people returning from work rather than departing for it. The smell of fish sauce drifts from the back room, sharp, pungent. The cowpo is preparing the evening meal service. You can hear the scrape of ceramic on stone, the rhythm of cutting, the splash of liquid into a pot. The oil lamps will need attention soon. The light is holding, but it won't hold past sundown. The freedman is explaining shield mechanics now, long sentences. Detailed breakdown of how angle compensation works when the dominant wrist is compromised. The muleteer interrupts with a question about reaction time, not challenging, genuinely asking. The freedman answers without hesitation, estimates the delay at 2/3 of a second. Cites the same fight from 73 AD as supporting evidence. You finish your water, the cup is empty, you could refill it or you could wait. You wait. The voice in your head that has been tracking consequences is still running calculations. If you reveal the interception to Marcus Octavius, you protect his business. If Gaius Livius discovers the letter never arrived, he will investigate. If Titus Aemilius Scaurus, the competitor in Neapolis, who was supposed to receive the reply, asks questions, the trail leads directly to you. 4 men, 1 letter. Multiple forms of professional destruction depending on who learns what first. The stone counter is warm under your forearms. Worn smooth by years of customers waiting for exactly what you're waiting for. Time to pass. Decisions to clarify themselves through stillness rather than action. The letter in the document case represents a specific form of commercial threat. Price fixing on Campanian wheat. Your employer's entire operation depends on competitive grain pricing. If the Pompeii merchant and the Neapolis competitor establish fixed rates, your employer doesn't lose a contract. He loses the capacity to bid competitively on any contract. Professional destruction, not dramatic, arithmetic. We know the sealed wax is still intact. We know you could return the letter to the correspondence case unopened, and let the market work itself out. We also know you've been carrying this thing for 90 minutes, and the wax seal is developing handling marks under your palm sweat. The cowpo is refilling oil lamps now. Methodical progression around the room. Each lamp gets the same attention. Wick trimmed, reservoir checked, flame adjusted to standard height. The muleteer has moved on from gladiator mechanics. He's describing a transport route through the mountains. The freedman is listening without interrupting. The conversation has shifted from debate to professional exchange. You watch the light change as the cowpo works. Each lamp brightens slightly, then settles back to its previous level. The room doesn't get noticeably warmer, but the shadows sharpen at the edges. If your employer discovers you read his correspondence, the question of whether you were protecting his interests becomes irrelevant. The fact of the violation is physical evidence. Roman law is extremely clear about physical evidence. The document case is leather, good quality. Your employer provided it when you began working for him 3 years ago. It shows wear at the corners, but the straps are still sound. 3 years of employment. Regular salary, no missed payments. Fair treatment by the standards of merchant operations in Puteoli. Loyalty is supposed to be automatic in that situation. You know this. Your employer knows this. The entire commercial structure of the grain trade depends on assistants who remain loyal without requiring explanations of why loyalty matters. The problem is that loyalty without evidence becomes theory after 90 minutes of sitting in a tavern holding intercepted correspondence. The tabular players are rotating positions. Someone new has joined, someone else has stepped away. The game continues through personnel changes without interruption. The bread on the counter is cooling. The smell has faded to background. A woman enters through the courtyard door, middle-aged, carries an empty amphora. She exchanges brief words with the cowpo, too quiet to hear clearly, and exits with the amphora filled. Wine, probably, or oil. The transaction takes less than a minute. The air coming through the door is cooler now. The temperature is dropping as the sun moves lower, not cold. Just the first suggestion that evening will eventually become night. Your hands rest flat on the stone. The left one is completely still. The right one is positioned near the document case. Not touching it, just near. You could walk to the forum, find your employer, explain what you found. You don't move. The muleteer laughs at something the freedman said, not loud, just acknowledgement that the comment was meant to be amusing. The document case has a brass clasp, simple mechanism, opens with thumb pressure. Your employer trusts you with it because theft would be immediately obvious and therefore pointless. But interception isn't theft, it's deviation, harder to prove, easier to deny. The calculations continue. The painted price list on the wall behind the counter shows ghost numbers beneath current prices. Faint but visible, if you know what you're looking for. The cowpo has repainted twice. You can see the layering. Original stew price was 3 arses lower. First adjustment sometime around 72 AD based on the paint oxidation. Second adjustment this year. The price list has been repainted twice. You can see the ghost of an older number beneath the current stew price. The original number was lower. This tells you everything you need to know about Campanian grain inflation between 70 and 75 AD, and also that the cowpo repainted the wall himself rather than hiring it done. Professional work, not artistic, the kind of task you complete because hiring a painter costs more than an hour of your own time with a brush. Your employer operates the same way. Minimal overhead, maximum efficiency. When grain prices shifted in 73 AD, he adjusted his bidding structure within a week. No consultations, no delays, arithmetic response to arithmetic pressure. That's why the letter in your document case is lethal. It's not proposing a merchant alliance. It's proposing market control through coordinated pricing. Your employer can't compete with that by being more efficient. He can only compete by knowing it exists before it's implemented. The freedman is leaving. He nods to the muleteer on his way out. The muleteer nods back. Professional acknowledgement between men who shared an hour of conversation and will never meet again. The room is slightly less crowded now, not empty. Just reduced to its evening population. You shift position on the bench. The document case moves with you, still sealed. Still viable as something you could claim you never examined if questioned. The oil lamps are steady now. The cowpo has finished his maintenance rotation. He's returned to the back room. The stone beneath your feet is uneven. Centuries of foot traffic have worn grooves into the pavers near the counter. The deepest groove runs from the entrance to the serving area. The path of maximum use. You can feel the depression through your sandals. The wall plaster near the doorframe is chipped, old damage. No one has bothered to repair it because the structural integrity isn't compromised. The building will stand regardless of cosmetic flaws. Your fingers trace the edge of the document case. The leather is smooth except where the strap attachments create raised lines. You can identify each component by touch without looking. The muleteer stands, stretches, sits back down. The movement serves no purpose except to break the monotony of stillness. The tabular game continues. Different players. Same sounds. Your employer will finish his forum negotiation eventually. When he does, he'll return here, expecting his assistant ready, with correspondence organized and muleteer prepared for departure. You have perhaps an hour, maybe less. The light through the courtyard door is fading. Not dark yet, just evening, beginning its transition toward night. The stone counter holds warmth. Your forearms rest against it. The position is sustainable indefinitely. A vendor passes outside. You hear his voice. Selling something, the specific words unclear. The rhythm of street commerce. It continues regardless of who is listening. You could decide now. Or you could wait and see if waiting makes the decision clearer. The room offers no opinion. Your employer does not know the letter exists. The Pompeii merchant does not know you intercepted it. The competitor in Neapolis does not know it was never sent. 3 parties, 3 versions of the same transaction, none of them including you, except you are the one holding the evidence that connects all 3. The sealed letter sits in your document case, the way evidence always sits when no one is looking for it yet. Present, intact, waiting for the moment someone asks the wrong question. The tabular players in the corner have moved past their 3rd round. The dice hit the wooden board with a rhythm that suggests men who believe they understand probability. One throws. The others react. The pattern repeats. You count 4 voices, 3 distinct argument styles, 1 consistent disagreement about whether the last throw was luck or skill. The game continues because no one has lost enough to quit, or won enough to collect. The cowpo refills their cups without being asked. He knows how long an afternoon game runs. He knows when to offer food, and when to let men drink through their losing streaks. The wine is ordinary, Vesuvian, probably from vineyards you passed this morning on the road from Puteoli. It costs what wine costs when the vintage does not matter, and the goal is volume, not quality. The tabular players are not here for the wine. They are here because the game needs a location, and the location needs customers. You watch the way he moves between tables, efficient, no wasted motion. He pours, collects payment, returns amphorae to their positions behind the counter. The system works because everyone knows their role. The customers pay. The cowpo provides. The transaction completes without requiring trust beyond the immediate exchange. You pay for wine. You receive wine. The next customer does the same. Provisional trust. That is the term. Not friendship. Not loyalty. Just the operational assumption that the other party will fulfill their side of the bargain, because not fulfilling it costs more than compliance. The tabular players trust the cowpo will not water the wine past the acceptable dilution ratio. The cowpo trusts they will pay before leaving. You trust your employer to return from the forum before sunset. Your employer trusts you to wait here without creating complications. The letter in your case violates every layer of that structure. You did not open it intentionally. The seal was already loose. Poor quality wax, probably mixed with too much ash, the kind that cracks in August heat before the letter reaches its destination. You were reorganizing the correspondence case this morning, sorting by merchant name the way your employer prefers, when the fold opened under your thumb. 1 line. That was all you needed to see before you understood what you were holding. The Pompeii merchant proposes fixed grain prices across Campania. Your employer's competitor in Neapolis would control the harbor contracts. The Pompeii merchant would control the interior farms. Together, they could set rates high enough to drive smaller merchants out while maintaining the appearance of normal market competition. Legal. Enforceable. Catastrophic for anyone who is not part of the arrangement. Your employer is not part of the arrangement. Your employer is the target. The seal is still intact. You pressed it back into place carefully, using the heat from the oil lamp in your quarters to soften the wax just enough. Anyone inspecting it casually would see an unbroken seal. Anyone inspecting it closely would see the microfractures where the wax re-adhered imperfectly. You are betting no one inspects it closely. You are betting the Pompeii merchant assumes his letter was sent, the competitor in Neapolis assumes it never arrived, and your employer never learns the letter existed. That is a lot of bets for one unsealed document. The tabular game grows louder. Someone just threw a combination that shifted the board position. The other players respond with the particular volume of men who are drinking steadily and losing slowly. The capo glances toward the corner, assesses the situation, decides no intervention is needed yet. You recognize the assessment. You have made the same calculation in grain warehouses when two suppliers argued over contract terms. How long to let the argument run before stepping in? How much volume is professional disagreement versus the kind that breaks amphore? One of the players, the freedman from the tanner's workshop, based on the smell that arrived with him, stands to stretch. He does not leave the table. Just moves, resettles, throws again. The game continues. No one here is on a schedule except you. Everyone else has time to wait for outcomes that might shift in their favor. You are waiting for an outcome that will not shift. Your employer will finish his negotiation. You will return to Puteoli. The letter will remain in your case or return to the correspondence pile. The decision is binary. The consequences are not. You do not know if your employer would believe you intercepted the letter to protect him rather than to steal it. 3 amphoras of ordinary Vesuvian wine sit between 4 tabular players, which works out to 3/4 of an amphora per person, which explains the increasing volume of their dice-throwing exclamations. The mathematics of tavern game endurance are consistent across centuries. The afternoon heat has settled into the kind of weight that makes men move slowly unless they are arguing. The tabular players are doing both, moving coins across the table with deliberate precision, arguing about previous throws with the energy of men who have lost track of how many cups they have emptied. You count the rhythm of the game by the sound of the dice hitting wood. 4 throws per round. 3 heartbeats between decision and reaction. The pattern holds. Your cup is still half full. You have been drinking it slowly enough that the capo has not offered a refill. Slow drinking signals intention. You are here for a reason other than wine, and that reason has a timeline. The capo understands this. He leaves you alone. He focuses on the tabular players, who are drinking at the pace that generates profit. The forum negotiation should have finished by midday. It is past midday now. The sun is moving toward the western wall of the Via dell'Abbondanza, which means your employer has been in discussion for at least 4 hours. Long negotiations mean complications. Complications mean variables you cannot control from a tavern bench. You adjust the document case against your hip. The letter is still there. Still sealed. Still carrying information that could destabilize 3 merchant operations simultaneously if it reaches the wrong person at the wrong time. Or the right person at the right time, depending on perspective. The problem is not whether to destroy it. The problem is not whether to deliver it. The problem is that both options require you to make a decision about something that is not your decision to make. Except it is, because you are the one holding it. A bread seller passes the open doorway, calling his inventory to no one in particular. 2 loaves left, honey cakes, Chickpea flour rounds baked this morning. His voice carries the particular tone of a man at the end of his route, willing to negotiate price, if it means carrying less weight home. One of the tabular players calls him over. The seller steps inside, sets his basket on the counter, begins the transaction. The cowper watches but does not interfere. The sale is between the bread seller and the customer. He is just the location. You are just the location too. The letter was passing through your hands on its way to Neapolis. You were the intermediary, the logistics, the mechanism that moved correspondence from one merchant to another, without needing to understand its contents. That was the professional boundary. You carried documents, you did not read them. You read this one. Not intentionally, the seal failed. But you could have resealed it immediately, without reading the exposed line, without unfolding the page, to confirm what you suspected. You did not do that. You read it. You understood it. You made a choice to keep it instead of sending it forward. That makes you part of the conspiracy or part of the protection, depending on which merchant is asked. The bread seller completes his transaction and leaves. The tabular player who bought the honey cakes breaks one in half, offers the other half to the man on his left. The gesture is automatic. Men who drink together share food. The receiver takes it without acknowledgement. The game resumes. The honey cake disappears in 2 bites. Your employer would ask why you opened a sealed letter. You would explain the wax was already cracked. He would ask why you read it after discovering the seal was broken. You would explain you needed to assess whether the document was still deliverable, or whether the broken seal compromised its confidentiality. He would ask why you did not report it immediately. You would have no answer that does not sound like theft or insubordination, unless you never mention it. Unless the letter stays in the case until you return to Puteoli, where it can be filed with other correspondence that arrived too late to matter. Merchants miss opportunities because of delayed messages all the time. No one suspects interception. They suspect incompetence, which is easier to forgive than betrayal. But if the Pompeii merchant follows up, if he sends another letter asking why the first received no response, your employer will learn the arrangement exists. He will ask whether any communication passed through your hands. You will have to produce the letter or explain why you do not have it. Either option ends the same way. The tabular game is down to 3 players now. One has stepped away to relieve himself in the alley behind the Calpona. The remaining 3 continue throwing, their voices lower now, the early afternoon energy fading into the steady focus of men who have committed to seeing the game through. You know this rhythm. You have seen it in warehouse negotiations that stretched past sunset, the point where volume drops and stakes rise. You drink the last of your wine. The cup is empty. You do not signal for more. The decision is not whether to protect your employer. The decision is whether you can afford to. The sundial outside the fuller's shop across the street marks the 8th hour. You can see it through the open doorway. A bronze gnomon casting its shadow across a marble face marked with lines that divide the day into increments that matter to men who charge by the hour. The fuller does not charge by the hour, but he keeps the dial maintained anyway, because customers appreciate knowing how much daylight remains for finishing work. You appreciate knowing how much time has passed since your employer entered the forum. 5 hours now. Long enough that the negotiation has moved past simple terms and into the architecture of obligation. Who pays? When they pay? What happens if they do not pay? The details that separate a verbal agreement from a contract that survives legal scrutiny. You do not know what your employer is negotiating. He did not say. You did not ask. That is the boundary. He conducts business. You manage logistics. He decides which letters to send, you ensure they arrive. He determines which merchants to trust. You carry the correspondence that builds or severs those relationships. Except this time, you determined which letter to stop. The tabular players are down to 2 now. The others left when the bread seller came through. taking their small losses with the philosophical resignation of men who know they will return tomorrow, and play the same game with the same results. The two remaining players are the ones who believe the afternoon can still shift in their favor. They are wrong, but they do not know it yet. The mathematics are already determined. The wine is almost gone. The dice have been thrown enough times that probability has settled into its predictable pattern. Of course, you recognize the price list repaint pattern matches the grain price fluctuation timeline from your own records. The professional observation skill that allowed you to intercept the letter in the first place. Competence that created the current dilemma. The cowpo is washing cups in a basin behind the counter. He uses sand and water, scrubbing each cup with a rag that has seen extensive service. The motion is automatic. The cups come out clean enough for the next customer. No one here expects perfection. They expect wine that tastes like wine and cups that do not carry the residue of the previous drinker's meal. The standard is functional. The cowpo meets it. You think about standards. Your employer's standard for correspondence management is accuracy and discretion. Accuracy means the right letters reach the right people at the right time. Discretion means you do not discuss the contents with anyone, including him, unless he asks directly. You have maintained both standards for 3 years. Until today. Today you chose discretion over accuracy. You kept the letter instead of sending it. That violates the accuracy standard but preserves the discretion standard, assuming discretion includes protecting your employer from threats he does not yet know exist. The logic works if you are his advisor. It fails if you are his courier. You are his courier. The fuller across the street is closing his shop. You watch him through the doorway, as he secures the shutters, checks the lock, adjusts the bar across the doorframe. His apprentice carries the last basket of finished cloth inside. The sundial will stay in place overnight. It is bronze, too heavy to steal, too public to vandalize. It will be there tomorrow when the fuller opens again. The same dial, the same shadow, the same divisions of time that govern when work begins and ends. Your work does not end when you leave Pompeii. It ends when you deliver the letter or destroy it. You have been considering a third option. You could lose it. Not deliberately. Just fail to account for it among the dozen other documents in your case. Correspondence goes missing in transit. Seals break. Pages tear. Couriers are robbed on the road between cities. Your employer would be frustrated, but he would not suspect interception. He would suspect the ordinary chaos of moving information across distance. But the Pompeii merchant would send another letter, and another. Eventually one would reach Neapolis. The arrangement would proceed without your interference. The only difference is timing. You would delay it, not prevent it. Unless you warn your employer. You could tell him what you read. You could explain that his competitor is working against him. That the Pompeii merchant is offering terms that would lock him out of the Campanian grain market for years. You could show him the letter as proof. And then you would have to explain how you came to read a sealed letter that was not addressed to him. The two remaining tabular players settle their final wagers. One stands, counts coins onto the table, leaves without ceremony. The other collects his winnings, finishes his wine, nods to the cowpo, and walks out into the afternoon glare. The game is over. The cowpo clears the table, wipes it down with the same rag he used for the cups, returns to his position behind the counter. The cowpona is quiet now. Just you and the proprietor, and the empty tables waiting for the evening customers who will arrive when the forum closes and the day's work is finished. Your employer will return soon. You will stand. You will collect the document case. You will follow him back through the streets to the stable where your mule is waiting. You will load the panniers. You will begin the walk back to Puteoli. And somewhere in those hours on the road, you will decide what to do with the letter. The cowpo refills your cup without asking. The wine arrives warm, which means the dahlia behind the counter are keeping afternoon heat rather than releasing it. The muleteer sits 2 positions down, leather bag between his feet, sandals crossed at the ankle, in the posture of someone who has mastered waiting as a professional skill. He's speaking to the freedman, voice carrying the flat certainty of a man stating facts rather than opinions. Merchants estimate 1 hour, he says. Forum negotiations run 3, always, I charge by the hour. The freedman glances toward the doorway, then back. Ever just leave? And lose the fare? The muleteer shifts his weight, bag repositioning with the movement. Waiting pays. Always does. The muleteer has been waiting for 1 hour for a merchant to complete a forum transaction. He is now explaining to the freedman that merchants always underestimate negotiation duration by a factor of 3. The muleteer charges by the hour. He is professionally comfortable with merchant optimism about timing. The tabular game continues at the far table. Dice hit wood with sounds that mark rhythm more than outcome. One player retrieves his pieces with the careful movements of someone calculating odds that shifted 3 throws ago. Your document case sits against your hip, leather warm from body heat, and afternoon sun that came through the doorway before the awning blocked it. The seal remains intact. The letter inside remains evidence of commercial conspiracy. Your employer, Marcus Fesonius Primus, the Puteoli grain importer whose entire operation depends on maintaining competitive pricing against the Neapolis syndicate, remains in the forum completing the negotiation that was supposed to take 1 hour, and has now stretched past 2. The muleteer knows exactly what he's being paid for, not transport but availability, not speed, but reliability. He'll collect his fare when your employer emerges from the forum, and that fare will reflect actual hours waited rather than estimated duration promised. The freedman returns to his wine. The muleteer adjusts his position again, settling deeper into the patience that defines his entire professional model. You understand the economic principle he's operating under. It's the same one governing your presence in this tavern. Being available when needed carries more value than being efficient when convenient. Your employer pays you to manage correspondence, track deliveries, and wait in Pompeii taverns, when forum negotiations extend beyond predicted completion times. The intercepted letter in your case was meant for Gaius Lutatius Daphnis, the Pompeii merchant whose price-fixing arrangement with the Neapolis competitor would have eliminated Marcus Fesonius from the coastal grain trade entirely. The room's warmth increases as more bodies filter through the doorway. Evening transition continues its predictable rhythm. Workers finishing shifts, merchants concluding transactions, travelers deciding whether to push for one more town or settle for Pompeii's commercial hospitality. The cowper moves between counter and storage, sandals marking the path worn smooth by decades of exactly this movement. Someone orders bread. The smell of yeast arrives before the product does. Your position at the counter offers clear sightlines to both doorway and interior. Professional habit, merchant training. Always know where exits are, who's entering, what's being carried. The document case registers as constant pressure against your hip, weight distributed across leather strap and wool tunic, in the specific geometry of something you cannot afford to forget or misplace. The muleteer was right about merchants and time estimates. Your employer said 1 hour. It's been 2. You're sitting in a Pompeii tavern, holding evidence you shouldn't possess, waiting for a man who doesn't know you're protecting him from commercial destruction, while a mule driver 3 positions down demonstrates what professional patience looks like when you charge by the hour, and clients consistently underestimate duration. The letter exists. The seal stays intact. The decision waits. You shift position, forearm resettling on volcanic stone. The document case moves from hip to the counter surface between you and your wine cup. Leather feels warmer than it should. Body heat held through afternoon sun and enclosed space. The case sits there, functional brown leather against dark stone, completely unremarkable in a room full of men carrying their work with them. No one notices. Why would they? Half the men in this tavern have document cases, money pouches, tool bags positioned exactly where you've just placed yours. The muleteer's bag sits between his feet. The freedman has a leather roll beside his elbow that probably contains tanning tools or commercial records. Even the cowpo keeps his accounts somewhere behind that counter. Wax tablets, maybe papyrus if he's tracking anything complex. Your case looks like everyone else's case. Worn, practical, the kind of object that signals profession rather than contents. The seal on the letter inside is still intact. You checked it an hour ago. You're not checking it again. Checking accomplishes nothing except confirming what you already know. The wax hasn't broken. The letter hasn't vanished. The problem hasn't solved itself through wishful observation. The stone under your forearm has temperature variation you're only now noticing. The section directly under your arm is warmer from contact. The section beyond that holds residual coolness from whatever the volcanic stone remembers about the earth it was quarried from. Tufa would be different, lighter, more porous, less thermal memory. This darker stone holds heat the way it holds shape. You pick up your wine cup. The case stays where you placed it. Small adjustment in weight distribution. Your hip no longer carries that specific pressure. Your forearm now rests near leather instead of against it. The difference is minor enough that no one in this room would notice if they were watching, which they're not. Because you're a merchant's assistant waiting for delayed forum business to conclude, and that's so completely ordinary in a Pompeii commercial tavern that it registers as background texture rather than individual presence. The tabular game sounds continue. Dice on wood, brief exclamations, pieces sliding across board surfaces with the scraping sound of stone on stone, or perhaps bone on wood, depending on what materials these particular players can afford. The cook emerges from the back room carrying another basket. Bread probably, or maybe fruit if the morning market delivery actually happened today. The supplier who failed the previous delivery isn't someone this establishment is likely to use again, which means contingency planning, different vendor, higher price, lower margin. Commerce adjusts to failure through practical substitution rather than complaint. Your forearm registers the counter's smoothness. Decades of elbows wearing the same groove you're currently occupying. The volcanic stone doesn't show tool marks anymore, just use patterns. Where people rest, where they lean, where they've been sitting for years in the specific posture you're demonstrating right now. The wine carries warmth down your throat. Second cup, maybe third. You've lost count, which means the cowpo is doing his job correctly. Keep the cups filled. Keep the customers settled. Keep the evening moving at the pace that makes men forget they're waiting for something else to happen. The document case beside your forearm contains one sealed letter. The letter proposes price-fixing arrangements that would destroy your employer's grain trading operation. The letter was never supposed to reach your hands. The letter currently sits in a leather case on a Pompeii tavern counter, while you wait for a man who doesn't know you intercepted his business correspondence. The weight has redistributed, hip to forearm, body to counter. The problem remains exactly the same weight it was before you moved it. The room has stopped noticing you. Not ignored. That would imply active choice. You've simply become part of the tavern's established pattern. The way the worn counter is part of the pattern. The way the cowpo's movement between storage and serving area is part of the pattern. You've been here long enough that your presence registers as continuity rather than arrival. Dice sounds continue from the tabular game. One player laughs. The short bark that signals social comfort rather than specific humor. The sound carries warmth without content, the kind of noise that marks a group settling into evening rhythms rather than maintaining afternoon formality. The muleteer has stopped checking the doorway. He's shifted into the deeper patience of someone who knows the wait isn't ending soon. His leather bag stays between his feet, but his posture has relaxed from readiness into endurance. The freedman orders more wine. The cowpo pours from the center dolia, the one that's been open longest, flavor profile established and predictable. New amphora means new characteristics, temperature, oxidation level. That first pour brightness that fades after repeated servings. Middle amphora means consistency, which is what most customers want, once they've moved past the initial drink, and into the steady consumption that marks actual evening settlement. Your document case sits beside your forearm. The leather has stopped feeling warm. Room temperature now, ambient heat rather than body heat, the case blending into the tavern's general warmth the way everything else in this space eventually does. Naturally, you've been here an hour and 15 minutes and the room no longer registers you as new. You've become part of the evening's texture, which is exactly what you need, while carrying evidence of commercial conspiracy in a leather case on a Pompeii counter. The oil lamps will be lit soon. Not yet. There's still enough daylight coming through the doorway to make flame unnecessary, but soon. The light quality has that late afternoon softness that signals transition between work hours and evening hours, the time when men stop moving between obligations and start settling into chosen positions. The cowpo's sandals mark familiar rhythm on stone, counter to storage, storage to counter. The sound has become predictable enough that you notice its absence more than its presence. When he stops moving, that's when attention shifts. When he's walking, that's just the tavern functioning as designed. Someone at the tabular game wins a round. The victor doesn't celebrate, just collects pieces with the quiet satisfaction of someone who played the odds correctly and received the mathematically expected outcome. His opponent resets the board without complaint. Next round. Same stakes, different dice fall. The document case beside your arm contains evidence you shouldn't possess. The sealed letter inside proposes commercial arrangements that Roman law considers conspiracy. Your employer is in the forum completing a negotiation that's run 2 hours past estimated completion. The muleteer who's supposed to transport you back to Puteoli is charging by the hour and professionally comfortable with merchant time estimation errors. If the interception is discovered, if Gaius Lutatius realizes the letter never reached him, if the Neapolis syndicate traces the missing correspondence back to a Puteoli assistant sitting in a Pompeii tavern, you become the visible point of failure in a chain of commercial conspiracy that involves men with considerably more resources and considerably less patience than you possess. You have become part of this tavern's evening rhythm, background presence, expected occupant, the man at the counter who's been here long enough to blend into the room's established patterns. The rhythm holds. The room continues. The letter waits. The cook emerges from the back room carrying flatbread. You see him before most of the room does. The movement in your peripheral vision is distinct from the cowpo's usual path between storage and serving area. Different height. Different rhythm. The cook moves with the careful balance of someone who has spent years carrying hot things through crowded spaces. The bread sits on a wooden plate, surface dark with garum, olive oil pooled in the center where salt fish has been arranged. Not elaborate, not designed to impress. Food that exists because someone in the back room decided it was time to eat, and made enough for more than one person. Every head in the room turns to watch the plate cross the floor. Not because anyone is particularly hungry, not because the food is remarkable, but because food moving towards someone else is inherently interesting when you've been sitting still for more than an hour watching afternoon become evening. The cook sets the plate on the counter 3 positions down from where you sit. The cowpo nods acknowledgement without interrupting whatever calculation he's performing, with the empty amphora beside the wine storage. The smell reaches you before the visual registration completes. Fermented fish sauce over warm bread, the sharpness of it cutting through the background layer of garum that has simply become part of the room's ambient scent. This is fresh. This is active. This changes the sensory environment from static to immediate. You watch the freedman from the tanner's workshop lean forward slightly, then resettle without moving toward the counter. The muleteer doesn't look up from his cup. The tabular players continue their game, but one of them glances toward the plate between throws. No one moves to claim it. The cook returns to the back room without announcement. The plate sits there, steam no longer visible but heat still present in the way the oil moves across the bread's surface. This is how tavern hospitality works in practice. Food appears, and the room sorts out who it's meant for through a series of social calculations too subtle to name but perfectly clear to everyone present. You are not local enough to assume it's communal. You are not established enough to treat it as an invitation. You watch it exist 3 positions away and make no move toward it. The letter case rests against your hip, still there, still sealed, still requiring a decision you haven't made. The temperature has shifted since you first sat down. The stone counter is cooler now where your forearm rests. Volcanic rock holding onto the memory of afternoon heat, but releasing it gradually as shadows lengthen through the entrance. Your tunic sticks to your back less. The air moves differently, carrying the smell of bread and garum, rather than just dust and bodies and wine. Outside, a cart passes. The wheel sound is distinct from the earlier traffic. Heavier load, slower pace, the kind of vehicle that moves goods at day's end rather than rushing to market at dawn. You don't turn to look. You've learned the acoustic signature of this street well enough to distinguish between commercial urgency and the satisfied weight of completed business. But for the moment, the room's attention has shifted to something simpler than your professional crisis. Bread exists, garum exists. Someone made food. And now the space has to determine what that means. You remain exactly where you are. The street entrance darkens with a new arrival. Your shoulders tighten before you consciously register why. Some part of your brain has already processed the height, the bearing, the quality of the cloak, and determined that this person operates at a commercial level that intersects with your professional world. A merchant, not local. The way he pauses in the doorway scanning the interior marks him as someone looking for a specific person rather than a place to sit. His gaze moves across the room with systematic precision, passes over the tabular players, registers the muleteer without recognition, reaches you. Stops. Your breath holds for the half second it takes him to complete whatever facial matching process he's performing, then his eyes move on. The freedman. The cowpo. Back to the door. He turns and leaves without entering. The merchant scans the room with the focused intensity of someone looking for a specific face in a crowd of strangers. His gaze passes over you, registers nothing, moves on. You do not appear in his mental catalogue of people worth remembering. This is the first professional victory you've had all day. Your shoulders release. The breath you were holding exits slowly enough that no one watching would notice the change. He was looking for someone. That someone was not you. Which means your employer is still in the forum, still negotiating, still unaware that his assistant is sitting in a tavern holding intercepted correspondence that could destroy a business relationship he doesn't yet know is threatened. You are professionally invisible to that merchant. This is good. This is exactly the level of significance you need to maintain for the next however many hours, until your employer finishes his negotiation, and you can determine what to do with the letter that shouldn't exist in your possession. The room has already forgotten the interrupted entrance. The tabular game continues. The muleteer hasn't looked up from his cup. The freedman is watching the cook's plate, like someone performing complex social mathematics, about whether enough time has passed to claim unclaimed food. Your tunic has dried completely now. The damp patch between your shoulder blades, the one that formed during your walk from the forum, when the afternoon heat was still assertive and your panic was fresh, has disappeared into the cooler air of early evening. Your sandal straps have stopped cutting into the tops of your feet, small physical reliefs that add up to a body slightly less unhappy than it was 3 hours ago. The cowpo is refilling the muleteer's cup without being asked. The wine makes a distinct sound against ceramic. Not the hollow splash of the first pour, but the heavier glug of liquid meeting liquid. Fourth cup, possibly fifth. You've lost count. But the muleteer's shoulders have dropped 2 inches since you first sat down, and his silence has shifted from wary to simply tired. You think about Marcus Livius, your employer in Puteoli, the man whose grain operation depends on relationships you might have just destroyed. You think about the Pompeii merchant whose letter you carry. You think about the competitor in Neapolis who was supposed to receive it, who is making arrangements you now know about but shouldn't. You think about yourself, if the interception is discovered. 4 names. 4 versions of professional ruin, radiating from a single wax seal you examined in direct sunlight, because you couldn't help yourself. You are part of the furniture again, anonymous, unremarkable. Exactly as safe as you were before the merchant scanned the room, looking for someone more important than a grain merchant's assistant, waiting for his employer to finish a contract negotiation that should have ended 2 hours ago. The letter case remains against your hip, the seal remains intact, the decision remains unmade. But you were not recognized. And in this specific context that counts as survival. Below the counter, where your forearm has been resting for most of the afternoon, paint marks the volcanic stone. You notice it now, because you've been looking at the same section of counter long enough that your vision has started finding details invisible during active attention. Faded red and yellow, deliberate rather than accidental. A serpent coiling around what looks like an altar, the imagery recognizable even through the wear of decades of elbows and spilled wine. The genius loche, the protective spirit of the place. Every properly observed establishment has one, painted, carved, embedded in mosaic, always visible somewhere in the public space. The snake promises that appropriate religious protocols are followed, libations poured, offerings made, the gods acknowledged according to custom, which translates practically to, the wine is wine, not flavored vinegar, the stew is stew, not yesterday's scraps with fresh garum. The weights are honest. The measurements don't shift, depending on whether you're local. You've been sitting in a room marked by promises you didn't consciously register until your eyes ran out of other things to catalog. The serpent is old. Older than the price list ghosts on the wall. Older than the counter groove worn by decades of waiting customers. This snake has been watching people sit exactly where you're sitting, since before your employer started his grain trade. Possibly since before you were born. The paint is fading, red becoming pink, becoming the memory of color, yellow turning pale, but still visible, still marking this space as observed, maintained, properly aligned with whatever forces the genius loci represents. You find this more comforting than you expect. Not because you believe a painted snake protects against business disasters, not because you think household gods care about intercepted letters or professional destruction, but because someone, at some point, took the time to mark this counter with promises about how business would be conducted. Honest weights. Fair measures. Wine. That is what it claims to be. The room continues around you. The tabular game sounds have changed rhythm. Someone winning. Someone losing. The dice making their judgments. The muleteer hasn't moved. The freedman is still performing his social calculations about the cook's unclaimed bread. Your forearm rests on volcanic stone, marked with faded promises about honesty. The letter in your case represents the opposite of those promises. Private correspondence intercepted, seals examined, information obtained through accident rather than permission. Every layer of commercial trust violated by the simple fact of your knowledge. The serpent doesn't care. The genius loci makes no judgment about grain merchants, assistants sitting in taverns holding evidence they shouldn't possess. But the paint is still there. The promise is still visible. You remain exactly where you are, forearm on stone, letter case against hip, decision unmade, waiting for your employer to finish a negotiation that keeps not finishing while afternoon continues its slow transition toward evening, in a room marked by very old promises about very simple things. The document case rests against your forearm, its weight familiar now rather than urgent, the leather warm and slightly damp from contact. You've been calculating the decision for 90 minutes, and the calculus hasn't simplified. Every option still carries destruction in one direction or another. The sealed letter inside represents either protection or theft, depending on who discovers it, and when and what story they believe. Roman law operates on the principle that physical evidence is evidence, your intentions are not evidence. The tabular game continues at the center table. One of the players, the man with the scarred forearm who's been winning steadily, throws again. His dice land heavy, favoring the same high combinations they've been favoring for the past hour. The pattern is too consistent. Nobody else has noticed yet. You shift your weight. The stone under your forearm has stopped feeling cold. It's taken on your body heat, or you've taken on its temperature. Either way, the boundary between the two has softened. The cowpo moves past, carrying an empty amphora, heading toward the storage area. His rhythm hasn't changed. The supplier who failed the morning delivery never reappeared. The wine ran out, was replaced, continues. Systems maintain themselves through repetition. The letter in your case was meant to break a system. Price fixing between merchants, coordinated supply restrictions, artificial scarcity. All of it designed to extract maximum profit, while the men who actually move the grain, men like Marcus Livius, your employer in Puteoli, get squeezed between fixed costs and manipulated prices. You intercepted that letter, not because you were trying to steal it. You intercepted it because reading correspondence meant for Gaius Theranius, the Pompeii merchant who arranged this meeting, taught you exactly how fragile Livius's position is. The letter was written by Sextus Pontius in Neapolis. A competitor Livius still believes operates in good faith. How many men in rooms like this one are making decisions that will destroy livelihoods, and doing it with sealed wax and professional language? But the law doesn't care about your reasoning. The law cares that you have physical possession of a document that doesn't belong to you. The seal is intact. The letter is undelivered. Those are the facts a magistrate would see. If Theranius discovers the interception, you become the criminal. If Pontius learns his letter never arrived, the investigation leads back to you. Your employer himself, if he questions how you obtain this evidence, might turn that investigation in your direction. The freedman laughs at something the muleteer said. The conversation has moved away from gladiators into some shared memory involving a merchant's cart and a donkey with opinions about steep grades. The laughter is genuine. These men don't know each other's names. They might never speak again after tonight. But right now, in this room, they're building something that looks like community. You think about what happens if you give Livius the letter tomorrow morning. He reads it. He understands immediately what it means, that men he's negotiated with in good faith have been coordinating against him. He has time to adjust, to find new suppliers, to renegotiate contracts before the price fixing takes effect. That's the version where your interception was protection. The other version, your employer asks where you got the letter. You explain you found it in his correspondence by accident. He asks why you didn't return it immediately. You explain you were evaluating whether he needed to know. He hears, his assistant opened his private correspondence, made independent decisions about what information he should receive, and has been carrying evidence of that decision around Pompeii for an entire afternoon. In that version, your loyalty looks like control, your protection looks like presumption. The muleteer stands, stretching, his back cracks audibly. He doesn't leave, just resets his position, settling back into his corner with the patience of someone whose entire profession is built on waiting for other people to finish their business. The evening crowd thickens. More customers filter in from the street. bringing with them the smell of cooling stone, and the particular dust that rises when afternoon heat finally breaks. The room absorbs them without disruption. The cowpo adjusts his rhythm. More cups, more wine, the mathematics of hospitality working themselves out in real time. You've been part of this pattern for long enough that nobody watches you anymore. The document case against your hip is just another piece of traveler's gear. The letter inside is theoretical until someone asks to see it. The tabular player throws again. High numbers. His opponents grumble. But they're grumbling at luck, not suspicion. You wonder how long the weighted dice will stay unnoticed. How many more rounds before someone else starts tracking the pattern? You wonder if your employer will notice the pattern in his business dealings before the price fixing takes full effect. The lamp oil burns steady. The room holds its warmth. Outside, somewhere in the forum, Livius is finishing his negotiation, or about to finish, or standing in one of those long pauses where both parties pretend they're still considering terms they've already accepted. When he returns, you'll have a choice to make. But right now, in this moment, the letter is just weight against leather. The decision is tomorrow's problem. Tonight, you're just another traveler, waiting for his ride home. The winning continues. 6 throws since you started paying attention. 5 of them landing high. The pattern is clear enough now that you can predict the next throw before it happens. Not because you know how dice work, but because you know how weighted dice work. The man with the scarred forearm scoops his pieces forward. His opponents pay out. Small stakes. Wine, not coin, but the principle holds. Over enough rounds, consistent advantage becomes systematic transfer. One man's cup stays full, while 3 others watch theirs empty. Nobody's checking the dice. That would require accusing someone of cheating in a public space, which requires certainty, which requires proof, which requires examining the dice closely enough to feel the weight distribution. Easier to assume bad luck. Easier to believe the gods favor some men more than others. You've seen this pattern before. Not with dice, with grain contracts, shipping schedules, warehouse access. Small systematic advantages that compound over time. Marcus Livius operates honestly, because he believes the system rewards honesty. The letter in your case was written by men who believe the system rewards coordination. Both groups are operating in the same market. The difference is that one group is weighting the dice. The freedman leans back in his seat, watching the game with the detached interest of someone who's already lost his drinking money, and is now just observing. He says something to the muleteer. You can't hear the words, but the tone is philosophical. The muleteer responds with a shrug that encompasses the entire concept of chance, fairness, and commercial reality. Your forearm shifts on stone. The temperature has fully equalized. The boundary between your skin and the counter is just pressure now. No thermal difference to mark where one surface ends and another begins. The cowpo emerges from storage with fresh wine. He moves through the room with practiced efficiency, reading which cups need filling before their owners signal. This is professional observation, knowing what people need before they ask for it, and providing it before the request becomes interruption. You think about what kind of observation your employer applies to his business, whether he notices the patterns in shipping delays, warehouse fees, supplier availability, whether he sees the coordination, or whether he attributes it to market forces and bad timing. Whether he needs someone to show him the weighted dice. The tabular player throws again, another high roll. The pattern holds. His opponents are starting to notice. You can see it in the way they watch the dice settle, the slight pause before they move their pieces. Not quite suspicion yet. Just the beginning of pattern recognition. You know exactly when they'll check the dice, not during the game. That's confrontation. After the game ends, when the man with the scarred forearm has left, someone will pick up the dice casually, feel their weight. Roll them a few times on the counter. And they'll know. But knowing after the fact doesn't return the wine already drunk, doesn't undo the rounds already lost. The advantage has already compounded. The evening has already been shaped by systematic cheating that looked like luck until enough rounds passed to reveal the structure. The letter in your case contains the same kind of information, proof of weighted dice in the grain trade. Evidence that what looked like market forces was actually coordination. Livius needs that information before more rounds get played. But giving it to him means admitting you were watching the game closely enough to notice the pattern, means explaining why you picked up the dice to check their weight, means standing in front of him tomorrow morning with evidence of patterns he didn't see, and making the case that your observation was protection, not presumption. The room has filled enough that individual conversations blur into generalized murmur. The lamplight catches the movement of hands, cups, the occasional gesture. The warmth is layered now. Bodies, breath, burning oil, residual heat from the day's sun still releasing from stone walls. The muleteer hasn't moved in 20 minutes. He's found his position for the evening, back against wall, sightline to door, cup within reach. Waiting with the professional stillness of someone whose livelihood depends on being ready when needed, but not spending energy before necessity. You recognize that stillness. You've been practicing it all afternoon. The tabular game concludes. The man with the scarred forearm collects his winnings, an amphora's worth of wine consumed at other men's expense. He stands. His opponents watch him leave with the particular attention of men who suspect something but can't prove it yet. One of them reaches for the dice. The oil lamps have been burning long enough that their smell has integrated into the room's base layer. You are now breathing olive oil smoke, garum fermentation, wine fumes, and donkey courtyard in approximately equal measure. Roman urban air quality operates on acceptance rather than improvement. The tabular player picks up one die, rolls it in his palm, feels its weight, sets it down and picks up the second. His face changes. Not dramatic, just the small adjustment that happens when suspicion confirms itself. He looks toward the door where the man with the scarred forearm disappeared 5 minutes ago. The other players lean in. The first player hands the die to the freedman, who hasn't been playing but whose judgment apparently matters. The freedman examines it with the careful attention of someone who knows weighted objects, knows how balance shifts, where lead can hide, what honest weight should feel like. He sets it down without comment. Just a small nod, confirmation. Nobody speaks. The discovery sits in the silence between them. The knowledge that they've been systematically cheated for the past 2 hours, that their losses weren't bad luck but manipulation, that the man responsible is gone and there's no mechanism for recovering what's already been consumed. The capo notices the stillness at the table, watches for a moment, understands immediately what's happened. You can see the recognition cross his face. He doesn't intervene. This is tavern mathematics. Men lose money, wine, dignity. They learn or they don't. The weighted dice will disappear before morning. Someone will throw them in the latrine, or drop them down a drain. The man with the scarred forearm won't be welcome if he returns. But that's tomorrow's exclusion. Tonight the loss stands. You think about how long Marcus Livius has been playing with weighted dice in his grain contracts without knowing it. How many negotiations he thought were fair competition. How many delays he attributed to bad timing. How many price increases he accepted as market forces. The sealed letter in your case is the equivalent of picking up the die and feeling its unnatural weight. Evidence that the game was rigged. Proof that what looked like bad luck was systematic manipulation. But evidence after the losses have already compounded doesn't undo the damage. The freedman stands, stretches, leaves coins for his wine. The muleteer watches him go, then settles deeper into his corner. The evening continues around the table of men who now know they were cheated, but can't do anything about it, except carry that knowledge into future games. Your forearm on the counter has gone completely numb, not from cold or discomfort, just from sustained contact. The pressure has become neutral. The stone is neither warm nor cool. You've been still long enough that the boundary between your body and the surface has disappeared into sustained equilibrium. The lamp flames hold steady, no wind disturbs them. The wicks burn at the rate of consumption. Oil drawn up, converted to light and heat, released as smoke that layers into the room's atmosphere. Patient combustion, no urgency in the burning. You realize you haven't moved in 10 minutes, haven't shifted weight, haven't adjusted position. You've become part of the room's architecture, another fixed element in the tavern's geometry. The document case against your hip is just pressure. The letter inside is just weight. The decision is just a problem that exists in a future that hasn't arrived yet. The capo moves through the room, refilling cups. His rhythm has slowed with the evening settling. No more rapid transitions, just maintenance now, keeping what's established in continuous supply. Outside, the forum is either empty or about to empty. Livius has either finished his negotiation or is finishing it. The muleteer will hear his signal soon. The specific whistle or call that means payment has been secured and departure is imminent. You'll stand, gather your things, follow the muleteer into the street. And somewhere on the road back to Puteoli, in the darkness between cities, you'll decide what to do with the letter. But right now the lamplight is steady, the stone is warm, the room holds its breath around you. Tomorrow is theoretical. Tonight is just this: oil smoke, garum smell, wine warmth, and the particular peace that comes from knowing the decision, while unmade, is at least fully understood. The wind shifts and brings the courtyard with it. Donkeys, hay, manure layered under straw. Not unpleasant, just present. The door to the back courtyard is open, which means the cook is ventilating the kitchen, which means the bread coming out won't taste of smoke. You've been in Roman cities long enough that animal smell registers as information, rather than complaint. The freedman's voice rises briefly, something about net weights versus announced weights, then settles back into the conversation's baseline rhythm. The muleteer responds with a sound that might be agreement or might just be acknowledgement that words were spoken. You're not tracking their content anymore. Just the fact of continuation. The wine in your cup has reached room temperature. You drink without tasting. The motion itself is what matters. The small, ordinary action that keeps you anchored to this particular place at this particular hour, while the forum negotiations continue without you. Through the doorway, the sundial shadow has moved. Not dramatically. Just enough that if you were counting, you'd know time is passing in the way it always passes when there's nothing to do but wait for someone else to finish their work. Your forearm rests on stone worn smooth by decades of other forearms. The leather case sits where it's been sitting for the past 2 hours. Its weight hasn't changed. The seal hasn't broken. The letter inside remains exactly as intercepted. Evidence or protection, depending on who asks and when they ask it. The letter that was meant for Marcus Livius in Neapolis, the merchant who would have used it to undercut your employer's grain contracts with the Pompeii warehouses. 3 names on that papyrus. The sender in Puteoli, the intended recipient, your own employer. And possibly a 4th, if anyone discovers you opened it, before deciding it was safer unopened. But right now, in this specific moment, it's just an object. Leather and wax and papyrus. Physical facts. The decision about what those facts mean can wait until your employer finishes his negotiation and asks for his correspondence. The donkey smell intensifies briefly as the wind shifts again, then fades back to baseline. Information received. Kitchen door still open. Ventilation working as intended. Somewhere in the back of the tavern, pottery clinks. Cups being stacked. Amphorae being repositioned. The sounds are distant enough that they register as texture rather than event. The capo moving through his late afternoon routine, preparing for the evening customers who will arrive when the forum empties. You close your eyes for a moment. Not sleeping. Just resting them against the late afternoon light filtering through the doorway, against the small persistent awareness that you're holding something you weren't supposed to see. The tabular players are still playing. You can hear the dice, the brief exclamations, the sound of pieces moving across the board. The rhythm is familiar enough now that it doesn't require attention. Just acknowledgement that the room continues around you while you wait. The conversations have blurred into continuous sound. Not that they've gotten louder, just that you've stopped parsing individual words. The freedman and the muleteer are still talking. Their voices rise and fall with the particular rhythm of men who've been arguing the same point long enough that the argument itself has become comfortable. But the content has dissolved into texture, peaks and valleys of emphasis, pauses that might be agreement or might be someone drinking. The donkeys in the courtyard have been there since morning. The wind is coming from that direction. You have been in Roman cities long enough that this registers not as unpleasant, but as information. Specifically, that the courtyard door is open, which means the kitchen ventilation is working, which means the bread will not taste of smoke. The warmth in the room has settled into something steady, not the aggressive heat of midday. Just the retained warmth of stone that's been holding afternoon sun for hours, and is releasing it slowly into the enclosed space. The wall behind you radiates it gently against your shoulders. The floor tiles release it upward in slow, invisible waves. Your breathing has slowed without you noticing when it happened. Somewhere between the last sip of wine and this moment, your body decided that this particular quality of waiting, wine warm, voice, hum, bread smell, didn't require vigilance. The letter is still in the case. The case is still against your hip. These facts haven't changed. What's changed is that they've become part of the room's background texture rather than its urgent foreground. One of the tabular players laughs, a brief sharp sound that cuts through the murmur and then subsides back into it. You don't know what caused it, don't need to know. It's just another element of the soundscape that tells you the tavern is doing what taverns do in late afternoon. The air itself has weight now. Not oppressive, just present. The particular density of late afternoon, in an enclosed Roman space, where bodies and bread ovens and afternoon sun have all contributed their warmth to the same small volume of air. You breathe it in. It tastes of wine vapor and wheat flour and the faint salt tang that all coastal cities carry. Through the doorway, the light has softened. Not sunset yet. But the angle has changed enough that the shadows inside the room have deepened slightly, making the lamp glow more visible even though the lamps themselves haven't changed. You shift your weight. The stone is cool where it wasn't touching your arm. You resettle. The coolness warms. The cycle continues. Somewhere in the forum, your employer is still negotiating. Somewhere in this room, decisions are waiting to be made. But right now, in this breath, in this particular quality of late afternoon warmth and voice hum and donkey smell information from the courtyard, those decisions feel less urgent than the simple fact of sitting still. The capo moves past your position carrying a cellar jar. He stops at the posca d'olio, the large clay vessel that's been dispensing vinegar water since you arrived. You watch without conscious attention as he tilts the jar and pours. No measuring cup. No marked line. Just the practiced motion of someone who's done this exact action thousands of times and knows by weight and angle exactly when to stop. Water first. Then vinegar from a smaller vessel. The ratio is something he learned 15 years ago and has never needed to recalculate. He doesn't taste it to confirm. Just seals the dolia and moves on to the next task. The measurement was correct, because the measurement is always correct. Repetition has worn the action smooth, the same way customer elbows have worn the counter smooth. You understand this completely, not because you run a tavern but because you've spent enough time in commercial spaces to recognize the difference between knowledge that requires thought and knowledge that lives in the hands. Your employer negotiates contracts the same way. The initial calculation happens consciously: grain prices, transport costs, storage fees, seasonal variations. But the final assessment, the moment where he decides whether to accept or counter, that happens in some part of his brain that doesn't show its work. He just knows. The way the cowpo knows when the Posca ratio is correct without tasting it. The same way you knew, looking at that letter's seal, exactly how much force would break it cleanly versus how much would leave evidence. The same way you knew, 3 sentences into reading it, that the decision wasn't whether to reseal it, but whether to mention it existed at all. Knowledge that doesn't show its work, numbers that resolve without conscious arithmetic. Risk assessment that happens faster than the time it takes to name what you're assessing. The document case hasn't moved. Your forearm hasn't moved. The leather is body warm now. The same temperature as your skin, which means you've been sitting here long enough that the boundary between object and body has blurred slightly. The muleteer and freedman are still talking, but their voices have dropped in volume, not whisper quiet, just lower. The kind of adjustment people make automatically when afternoon slides toward evening, and the social energy in a room shifts from active to settling. The lamp nearest your table flickers once, not going out, just responding to some small change in air current. The flame steadies, the light continues. Small variations within larger constancy. Your eyelids are heavy now, not from wine. You stopped drinking an hour ago. Just from the accumulated weight of waiting in warm air, surrounded by voices that require no response, holding an object that requires no immediate action. Outside, the sundial shadow continues its slow transit across marble. You can't see it from here, but you know it's happening. Time moves whether you're watching it or not. Decisions wait whether you're ready for them or not. But in this moment, watching the cowpo's practiced hands measure without measuring, you're content to let the waiting continue a little longer. The oil lamps cast steady amber light, no flicker. The flames settled into their stable burn. The room's edges have softened in your peripheral vision, only the counter and the immediate space holding clear definition. The warmth has become a continuous presence, rather than something you notice in distinct moments. The cowpo refills the Poscadolia from a cellar jar, and you watch him measure the water-to-vinegar ratio by eye, the way someone measures anything they have done 3 times a day for 15 years. Professional measurement precision and actual measurement tools have an inverse relationship in Roman commercial life. He tips the jar, stops, tips again. The liquid runs in a steady pour that he cuts off without hesitation. No measuring cup, no marked lines. Just the practiced angle of a container held at shoulder height, and the knowledge that comes from repetition so complete it lives in the body, rather than the mind. You've watched enough grain merchants work to recognize the pattern. They can pour a modius to within a handful of kernels without looking at a scale. The hand knows what the eye would take too long to verify. The dolier accepts the mixture. The cowpo wipes the rim with a cloth that's been performing the same function since morning. Returns the cellar jar to its position behind the counter. The entire sequence takes perhaps 20 seconds. Across the room, one of the tabular players shifts position. The movement is minimal. A shoulder adjusting, weight redistributing on the bench. The game continues without interruption. Dice hitting wood in the rhythm you've been hearing for hours now. The document case rests against your side, leather warm, weight familiar. The decision it represents has receded into something you'll address later. Not tomorrow, not next week, just later, when the moment requires it. When your employer in Puteoli finishes his forum business, and expects his correspondence organized and his transport ready. Right now, in this particular quality of lamplight and ambient warmth, the letter is simply an object. Paper, and wax, and ink. A physical fact requiring no immediate response. The bread smell from the back room has faded, but not disappeared. It's joined the base layer of scents. The garum, the wine, the smoke from the lamps. The stones absorbed heat, releasing slowly as evening settles over the Via dell'Abbondanza. You don't need to check the courtyard doorway to know the light outside has changed. The quality of sound tells you. Voices from the street have that particular timbre that comes when direct sun no longer reaches the pavement and people move through shade that will soon be darkness. The muleteer hasn't moved from his position, still waiting, still being paid to wait. The contract between him and his merchant, clear enough that neither party needs to discuss it. Your own contract, the unspoken one that involves protecting business interests without being asked to, remains in the same state of productive ambiguity it's occupied since you sat down. Theoretically urgent, practically deferred. The capo moves past your position, carrying empty cups toward the back room. His path is the same one he's been walking all afternoon. The most efficient route between serving area and kitchen. No wasted motion. The lamplight holds its amber constancy. The voices continue their comfortable hum. The decision waits, patient and undemanding, in a leather case against your hip. The dice still hit the wooden board in the back corner. Rhythm distant and regular. You don't turn to watch anymore. The sound is simply part of the room now. Like the slight draft from the courtyard door, or the way stone holds temperature long after the sauce changes. Your forearm on the counter has found the position it will probably hold until you leave. Not conscious arrangement anymore, just where the arm goes, where it's been going for hours. The tabular game produces a brief exclamation. Someone's throw landing better or worse than expected. The sound rises and settles back into the general murmur. No response required from anyone not sitting at that particular table. The bread from the back room is long finished. What remains is memory of bread. The yeasty warmth that spread through the space earlier has been absorbed into other smells, other temperatures, still present if you think about it, ignorable if you don't. Lamplight on volcanic stone creates small shadows where the surface isn't perfectly smooth. You've been looking at the same section of counter long enough that these shadows have become familiar. Not beautiful, not meaningful, just there. Existing in the same patient way everything in this room exists. The document case hasn't shifted position in perhaps an hour. Its weight is part of your body's understanding of where your edges are. Like clothing. Like the sandal strap you stopped noticing before you even entered Pompeii this morning. The voices in the room continue their soft overlap. You couldn't repeat what anyone's saying. The words aren't important. The fact of people talking in a warm space as daylight fades, that's what matters. That's what the sound means. The muleteer is still waiting. You're still waiting. The cowpo is still moving through his established patterns. Nothing has changed, and nothing needs to. Outside, the street has that particular evening quiet, not silence, just the sound of a city shifting from work to rest. Shops closing. People going home or going to other tabernae where they'll sit and wait for whatever they're waiting for. Your breathing has matched the room's rhythm without you deciding to match it. In, out, steady, the same pace as the lamp flames, the same patience as stone. The dice sound continues, will probably continue. Later there will be a last throw, a final accounting, money changing hands or not changing hands. Right now there's just the rhythm. The click of ivory on wood. Again. 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 The counter has held the day's warmth and your body's warmth. Temperature perfectly neutral against your forearms. Not hot. Not cold. Just constant. The way stone holds what's given to it and releases it slowly, without judgment. The document case leather is soft and warm. No longer a weight but just a presence. Like your clothing, like the air in your lungs. Someone moves near the entrance, footsteps crossing from street to threshold. The movement registers but doesn't require attention. People have been entering and leaving all afternoon. The pattern is familiar enough to be invisible. The lamp flames continue their steady burn. You haven't looked directly at them in perhaps an hour. Don't need to. The amber light they cast is simply the color the room is now. Has been. Will be until someone extinguishes them later, after you've gone. The voices have become texture rather than information. Sound that means people, warmth, occupied space. Nothing needs to be understood, nothing needs to be answered. Your employer in Puteoli will ask questions tomorrow. The Pompeii merchant who wrote the letter expects it delivered. The competitor in Neapolis who was supposed to receive it waits without knowing he's waiting. And you, if the interception is discovered, will answer for the choice you haven't made. These facts exist somewhere outside this room, in the version of time that involves consequence and decision. Here, the decision about the letter has dissolved into the same future as everything else that isn't this moment, not resolved, not forgotten, just postponed into a space that feels less immediate than the stone's warmth, the lamp's constancy, the soft hum of evening settling over the city. The tabular game continues in its corner. The dice will fall, have fallen, will fall again. The rhythm doesn't change. The Caupo refills a cup without being asked. The Posca moves from dolia to hand to table. Small actions that require no thought, because they've been performed in the same sequence since morning, since yesterday, since all the mornings and evenings this taberna has stood on the Via dell'Abbondanza. Your breath moves in and out, the lamps burn, the voices continue their soft overlap. Outside, the bronze sundial in the forum marks hours that matter to men who track them. Here, in this enclosed warmth, time moves differently, measured in breath, in the slight cooling of air as sun leaves stone, in the way lamplight makes small shadows that don't shift, because nothing is shifting. The room holds you the way it holds everyone, patient, warm, asking nothing. The amber has stopped changing. The oil lamps hold their glow at the same intensity they've held for the last hour, maybe longer. Time has become difficult to track when nothing shifts. The flames don't flicker. The light doesn't deepen or pale. It simply exists, warm and constant, filling the space between stone and ceiling with a color that asks nothing. Your eyelids are heavy. Not the sharp tiredness of interrupted sleep or the gritty exhaustion of a long day's travel. This is the pull of a body that has been still long enough to remember stillness is its natural state. The effort of keeping your eyes open has quietly become greater than the effort of letting them close. The taberna continues around you, voices in their low evening register, the occasional scrape of a cup on stone, someone's footstep crossing from doorway to counter. But the sounds don't demand attention. They're part of the room, the way the lamp smoke is part of the room, the way the faint yeasty warmth from the kitchen is part of the room. Your forearm rests on volcanic stone that has held the afternoon's heat and your body's warmth, and settled into a temperature that feels like neither, just contact. Just surface. The document case sits where it has sat for hours, its weight familiar enough that your hip has stopped registering it as separate from the rest of you. The decision that was urgent this morning, pressing this afternoon, has become theoretical. Your employer in Puteoli will expect an answer. The Pompeii merchant who wrote the letter will continue his calculations. The competitor in Neapolis who was supposed to receive it will wait for intelligence that will never arrive. And you, if the interception is discovered, will have your own accounting to make. But all of that exists in some other version of time. Tomorrow's time, the forum's time, the time when roads require navigation and consequences demand attention. Right now, in this specific quality of amber lamplight and bread smell, and the gentle percussion of dice on wood, there is no decision to make. There is only sitting. The voices blur into a single warm hum. You're not listening to words anymore. Just the fact of human presence. The sound of a room full of people who are also waiting, also resting, also letting the evening settle around them without resistance. Your breath has slowed without you noticing when it happened. In. Out. The rhythm matching something in the room. Maybe the distant sound of the cook moving through the kitchen. Maybe the pattern of the tabular players' turns. Maybe nothing at all. Except your own body finally accepting that urgency belongs to daylight, and daylight is gone. The lamplight holds steady. Your eyes close halfway, then all the way, then open again without conscious instruction. The room looks exactly the same. The amber hasn't changed. The voices haven't stopped. The stone under your forearm retains its patient warmth. You let your eyes close again. This time they stay closed. Darkness behind your eyelids, but not the darkness of night. The amber glow penetrates, soft, diffuse, the color of the room bleeding through closed lids so you can still sense the lamplight without seeing it. Warm red gold, pressing gently against the thin skin, a reminder that the world is still there, still lit, still holding you. The smell of bread has been constant since you arrived. Yeasty, faintly sweet, the particular warmth of grain that has been transformed by fire and time into something that smells like safety. It doesn't come in waves anymore. It doesn't announce itself. It's simply the bass note underneath everything else. The olive oil, the lamp smoke, the garum tang that never quite disappears from a Roman tavern. You breathe it in without thinking. The air moves through your nose, down into your chest, carrying the smell of this place with it. Bread and oil and smoke. The smell of Pompeii in summer. The smell of every thermopolium on every street where travelers stop and wait, and let time pass without fighting it. Your body has surrendered its edges. The boundary between your forearm and the stone counter has softened into something theoretical. You know distantly that there is a place where your skin ends and the volcanic rock begins, but the distinction has stopped mattering. Both are warm, both are still, both are here. The document case against your hip, you remember it exists, but the urgency has dissolved completely. Whatever tomorrow requires, it will require tomorrow. Tonight asks for nothing except breath and warmth, and the particular piece of a body that has finally stopped carrying tension it didn't need. The voices in the room have become pure texture. No individual words, no specific speakers, just the gentle rise and fall of human sound. A blanket of presence that wraps around you the way the lamplight does, the way the bread smell does, the way the stone's retained warmth does. Everything soft. Everything safe. You sink deeper into the sensation of sitting, the sensation of warmth, the sensation of a world that has reduced itself to amber light behind closed eyes, and the smell of bread, and the knowledge that you are held, by stone, by lamplight, by the simple fact of other people breathing in the same room. Nothing needs to happen. Nothing needs to change. The taverna continues its quiet work around you, and you rest within it, breath by breath. One continuous sound now. Not voices, just voice. Singular. The conversations have merged into a single gentle vibration, a hum that fills the space the way water fills a vessel, taking the shape of the room and holding it. The dice sound has disappeared into it. Or maybe the dice are still falling, still clicking against wood, but the individual impacts have blurred into the overall texture. Everything is hum. Everything is warmth. Everything is the sensation of sound without the effort of listening. Your breath moves in the same rhythm. Slow. Automatic. The kind of breathing that happens when a body has forgotten it was ever tense, ever urgent, ever anything except this. Resting. Settling. Dissolving into the amber-lit warmth of a room full of strangers who have become, without ceremony, companions in stillness. The lamplight presses through your eyelids. Red gold, constant. A color that asks nothing, promises nothing, simply exists as proof that the world is still here, still warm, still holding you, in its particular August peace. Somewhere in the room, someone moves. You hear the footstep, a single soft impact of leather on stone, but it doesn't pull you back into alertness. It's part of the hum, part of the texture, part of the gentle audio blanket that the taberna has woven around everyone inside it. The bread smell remains. The stone warmth remains. The voices becoming hum remain. And you, resting against volcanic rock in a tavern on the Via dell'Abbondanza, remain exactly where you are, exactly as you are, breathing in time with a room full of people who are also breathing, also resting, also releasing the day into the soft anonymity of evening. The world has no edges now. Just warmth, just amber. Just the gentle pressure of sound that might be voices, or might be breath, or might be nothing at all except the night settling over the streets outside. The taberna continues around you, but you are no longer separate from it. You are the stone's warmth. You are the lamplight pressing red gold through closed lids. You are the bread smell and the voice hum, and the soft rhythm of breath that belongs to everyone and no one. The document case rests where it has rested all evening. Your breath slows to almost nothing. In, out. The rhythm of the room, the rhythm of rest, the rhythm of a body that has finally stopped asking questions, because there are no questions left that matter in this particular amber moment. The voices fade to pure hum. The lamplight holds steady. The stone releases its warmth degree by degree, so slowly you can't feel the change, only the constancy of contact, skin against rock, warmth against warmth, breath against the bread-scented air. Your eyes stay closed. The taberna breathes around you, and you, resting in this Roman evening, finally let the day go completely in sleep.